would you characterise the relationship between Russia and Vietnam, and how is it different to that of Russia and North Korea?
Right. It's a comprehensive strategic partnership. That's the highest level that Vietnam has for its international relations, and that followed the one with China. So it's a major power to deal with. The difference is that Vietnam is not a formal military ally and does not provide military support to Russia, but is heavily dependent on Russia for its past military equipment. But they have relationships in oil and gas exploration in the South China Sea, and Vietnam has a policy of multilateralizing and diversifying its relations, so it's never going to be solely an ally of Russia or China or the U.S., and it wants to balance all those relationships and not, like North Korea, to take a firm side with Russia and provide weapons and support the war in Ukraine.
And it is a delicate balancing act indeed. Who needs who more? I mean, you touched on some of the reasons for the relationship. Moscow has long been that source of weapons for Vietnam, and I'm sure that President Putin is keen to hang on to that.
Well, I'd rather put it the following way. It's not in Vietnam's interest to see Russia isolated and made weak in the long strategic term, because it's going to be a major player, member of the UN Security Council. Russia badly needs to break away from that isolation of the West and demonstrate it has broader support. So North Korea and Vietnam are part of it, the BRICS, Brazil, etc., the other smaller grouping that's expanding. So Russia needs Vietnam as an alternative. And Vietnam, by the way, can garner enough support to be elected to the UN Security Council as a non-permanent member twice. So Russia tries to piggyback on Vietnam's prestige, and Vietnam, in return, uses Russia to ward off U.S. and Chinese pressures.
How will Vietnam manage this relationship? We know, as you've just outlined, that Russia is clearly an important defence partner for them, but Vietnam has upgraded or been upgrading its relationship with the US. How will it manage these conflicting relationships?
Well, it manages them by demonstrating strategic autonomy and trying to make it in all its partners' interests that if you don't work with Vietnam, you risk Vietnam aligning with one of your challengers or partners or competitors in the world. And Vietnam does that by growing its economy and now trying to really move into resilient supply chains, computer chip supplies to the West. So mutual interdependence among all of these so that any one country can't really act too much against Vietnam.
How cautious do you think Vietnam will be when it has its relationship with Russia in view of Russia's relationship with China, particularly when it comes to the South China Sea?
Well, Vietnam tries to play both ends at the same time. They've had Xi Jinping visit last year. This is a follow-on visit. Russian oil companies have vested interest in Vietnam, particularly in areas that China is challenging. They've, according to one analyst, have stood their ground. They're still there. And so Vietnam tries to use that Russian presence to ward off Chinese pressures in its dealings, and by having Russia there to encourage Western oil companies to keep exploring for oil.
This is Mr. Putin's fifth visit to Vietnam. It obviously follows other high-level visits from international counterparts. President Biden has been there, President Xi Jinping last year. Why are leaders so keen on Vietnam?
Well, it's one of the fastest-growing economies in the region. It's moving into high-end computer chip manufacturing, electric vehicles. It's willing to operate. It has good natural resources that they need. And it plays a very strong, influential role in ASEAN and other regional bodies. As it's the unanimous choice of the Asia bloc, 50-odd countries twice to get into the UN. So Vietnam has a lot of international prestige and influence that way. It speaks for the global South.
And so what do you think is going to be on the agenda? What is going to look like a successful outcome for both Vietnam and Russia? I imagine there's this idea of strengthening their strategic partnership, but the war in Ukraine would loom large as well, I'm sure.
Well, Vietnam has adopted a neutral position in the middle, that it favors the UN Charter, peace, etc. It won't use the word war about Russia's so-called special operations. So that will be the way that they sell it. It's for peace. China has a peace proposal. Russia has a peace proposal. Switzerland just had a peace proposal. So Russia's already praised Vietnam for being practical in doing that. So Vietnam has assumed the kind of neutral, non-committal position on that.
And do you expect there to be a joint statement at the end with regards to some sort of strategic partnership?
Well, they've already had the comprehensive. They'll put a gloss on it. They'll sign agreements, justice, education, public health, trade, investment, to show that the relationship, every visit has made it go up a step. That's natural diplomacy. So there'll be, it'll be the duck on the surface of the water swimming peacefully, but what we won't know are the hard, tough issues that they discussed internally.
Yeah, everything that lurks beneath the surface. Emeritus Professor Carl Thayer, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insight.
Thank you.